All right. Mic check, check. I'm good. So I'm Max Ceron. Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding podcast. Today we have a really cool guest. Welding podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, here from the CWB, ready to have another great interview with another really fun guy that's out in the East Coast. Today we have Brad Forsey. Forsey or Forsey?
Forsey.
Forsey. So like telling the future. So you must be some type of magical being.
Haven't quite figured that out yet, but still working on it.
So Brad's coming to us. He works for a company called Cahill, or I believe I said that right.
Yeah, anything west of Newfoundland and Labrador refers to it as Cahill, and here on the island it's called Cal. But either
Cal.
works.
All
Cal.
right, good. And I was going to your guys' website. You guys got quite the footprint now. Like you're all over the eastern seaboard, and then you also have a big office in Calgary now.
Yeah, we've. I joined Cal in 2008, and it was a company that started in the 50s as an electrical
Hmm.
contractor of all
I saw
things.
that
But
1953. Yeah.
yeah, 1953, and as the years went on, it grew and grew and grew, and we are at certain times of the calendar year, we're from coast to coast, depending. So we've got an operation in Western Canada, in Central Canada, and Ontario. But for sure, our mainstay is Eastern Canada in the Maritimes and Newfoundland, Labrador.
That's awesome. And let's just start with Brad. The story, because you have had a pretty remarkable story. And it's a path that I think many people in the trades kind of go down, at one point or another, and you have to kind of make those decisions. So let's start off with where you're from. Where were you born, Brad? Where you come from?
I'm born in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, but I grew up in a little community on the south coast of Newfoundland called Grand Bank, and that little community is named after the infamous or famous fishing grounds, the Grand Banks, in the
Oh,
North
okay.
Atlantic, where cod was once plentiful, right? And so that's a little community of 2,000 or so, maybe a little less, depending here these days. So I grew up there and went to middle school and high school, and then upon finishing the high school, did a went to a community college, or the College of the North Atlantic, as they call it here in
Hmm.
on this province, and I did welding engineering technician program, a 2-year diploma program.
So the
Uh,
WET program is very popular in the East, and let me tell you, for the Western listeners out here, that program has never really crossed Ontario, and I find it to be a fantastic program, and I've lobbied for it or versions of it to be taught out here. So, what is the WET program for the listeners?
yeah, for sure. It was well, in high school. You're trying to find a way, and I was an individual that I kind of knew I wasn't going to be a university person. The 4-year plus arrangement, not something that I wanted to entertain. The other side of that was I had to leave home, and I'm a December baby, so upon graduating high school, you're still 17 and dipping your toe in the post secondary, not quite ready yet, having too much fun. So and living on the cheap, right? Living with mom and dad. So I went to Buren, which is about half an hour away, and did that program. And if you look at it, and I'm on the advisory board for that all these years later, with another colleague of mine that works for Cal, and we make sure that we have input into it. It's a great program. It's evolved over time. So many years ago, from what I understand, you actually had to be a journey person welder to
Oh.
get into the program, because it was next level up, from what I understand,
Hmm.
in and having a basis of understanding of the trades, right, and the welding trade. Obviously, enrollment dictated they made some adjustments, and changed the curriculum, and people like me coming out of high school, or maybe even not quite finished their blocks, got back in. So
Yeah.
it gave me an exposure to um, metallurgy, um, welding,
Hmm.
trade math, blueprint reading. You were into um, CWB, you get your tickets, stick, flux core, all that types of exposure. So there was a balance between, you know, welding, trade math, but at the same time you were shop and you were school. So you were balanced between the two. And it was jam packed into 2 years. So
Mhm.
not like your university program where you had your finished up in the spring, you had your summer off. You went right through a spring intersession, and it was jammed into 2 years. So you came out of there, even now, most recently, you come out of there with a level one. So when you finish these 2 years, you can write the exam for your CWB visual ticket. That
Mhm.
didn't happen when I graduated in 2001, but we did graduate with our welding ticket and
Okay.
some good exposure. So having those stick and flux core tickets with CWB all position, as well as the exposure to the B pressure ticket. So we didn't necessarily have the ticket, but we ran through how that all worked. I jumped on a plane, like many people from the East Coast,
Mhm.
right? And by that time I was 19, so I was ready now. And I jumped on a plane. And funny enough, I tell many of folk, it was the first time on a plane. Actually, I'd never
Oh,
been
really?
a plane, traveled anywhere up until then. And so, that was pretty cool. And landed in Calgary and went to Brooks, Alberta, which a lot of people from my neck of the woods in the Burin Peninsula, Newfoundland and Labrador, ended up there working, and got a job in a welding shop there, and did a little bit of welding and a little bit of inspection. That's how I started out with a company in Brooks.
There's an interesting joke here in Regina about Brooks. If the wind's just right, you can smell it.
Absolutely, I'll never forget it. Yeah, it is
And
absolutely.
for people that don't understand the joke, Brooks has a number of meat processing plants, and they're huge. Some of the biggest in all of Canada. They supply a lot of the beef and pork and chicken for the whole country and export it. And processing animals is a odorous in industry.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. So we were the company that I work for, DePaggio Construction, still in
Hmm.
operation today, from what I understand. Got some buddies that still work there, even though I moved back to Newfoundland. And good company to start out with and get exposure, pressure piping, pressure
Hmm.
vessels, as well as the service industry. So that was pretty cool because after about a couple of months, I actually ran a rig truck. Like a
Oh,
lot of
that's
people out
fun.
west, and
Hmm.
go out and do the rig repairs and the various rigs. And that was pretty cool. And can't help but tell this story about, in Newfoundland we had topical maps, and you find your way around like most places. But in Alberta they had, these different ways of giving you numbers and directions of,
Directions.
and then getting in there. So trying to understand all that, but running the rig trucks and working in there. So I stayed there for probably 5 years, working in Brooks. And what I did, I went back to school. So even though I had the welding engineering technician program, and I was doing some dye penetrant and some visual inspection and inspection writing for
Hmm.
service companies and whatnot, um, there would be the spring breakup, and it'd be a slow time of the year. So I would always avail, and I asked for to be laid off, and
Hmm.
because I had no intentions of leaving, and they had no problem letting me go. And I would go to school then, and do each one of my blocks. So I could have very well, like a lot of folks, focused on the inspection only, but I was so intrigued by welding and what it was all about, and I had a hard time being younger trying to explain to people who are much older than me and much more experienced how. So I figured if I learned how, I'd probably have a better chance of them listening. So that's what I did.
And right away when you're telling your welding story, it's like you were in Alberta because you called it your B pressure, right? And Alberta is one of the only places that calls it the B pressure ticket. Many other provinces will call it the initial six or the 6 and 2, F3 5, F3 F4. Lots of different variations of how you talk about it. But when you're in Alberta, when they talk about your B pressure, they're talking about your initial six, and then further off the 2 inch, and then the heavy wall 2 inch, which is like the big money maker now. So you know
Absolutely.
how did you like the system there, like coming from the East Coast and then coming to Alberta? Many come for work, not many come for school, right? So
Yeah.
how was that education comparing, like, did you how was that little journey?
Well, again, coming out of high school, I jumped right into the college system here.
Mm-hmm.
So adapted to that as best I could, and seemed to go well. In landing in Alberta, one thing I could tell was it was certainly an established system. Knew what they were doing,
Mm-hmm.
and you know were accustomed to building and training and teaching tradespeople for a long while. It was a well-oiled machine. It was also a reason why I kept going back,
Mm-hmm.
because it was enjoyable. You were getting good training from them, and it was nice for me because even though I was working in Brooks, my girlfriend at the time, which is now my wife, who also moved up from Newfoundland, she was going to nursing school at the Medicine Hat College. So I moved to Medicine Hat, and so even though I was working in Brooks, I went to college in Medicine Hat, and
Mm-hmm.
that was a phenomenal college to learn. Small but mighty, right? And
Yeah.
that was good for me because coming from a little town of 2,000 or so, there was enough overwhelming happening as things were going, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a great system, great learning as you got through, and you definitely, I kept in contact still today with some of those teachers that I had in that system.
And the colleges in Alberta are really world renowned. Like they have great teachers, got great program. They put a focus, or Alberta as a province, their apprenticeship system put a focus on a start to finish plan decades before anybody else did. And you can see that there's the amount of trades work in Alberta has, been a keystone to their economy for a long time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And 2005, I just had the card here right in front of me as I'm speaking with you because I knew you were going to ask me that question. Is when I got my journey person certificate, and that was a pretty proud day because
Hmm.
now like a lot of people that go into the trades take different directions. Some welding, and they become, I'm going back to pipe fitting, or I'm going to be a millwright, and so for myself, putting my arms around the welding trade, I had the inspection, but now on top of that, I had the ability, if things slow down or if I wanted to take part, I could help or take part in the actual fabrication in the places that I was working at.
Well, and knowing more of the picture, the bigger picture outside your own job, makes it easier for everybody around you. It really does. And communication, because communication is key, right? And then also like terminology and understanding of expectations. Like you can always tell an engineer who has never taken any welding training within the first two sentences. You
Yeah,
know,
I'm not gonna begin ragging on the engineers because I know you have a lot of engineers on the calls,
I
and this.
get lots of engineers on the program,
I
right?
know, I know. I've listened to a few of these podcasts, and that's all good. Not going to rag, but I will put a plug in for my approach, I guess, because I think even still today, the fact that I worked with a lot of those welders and became a welder, uh, I stayed in the trade. I'm working for a construction company now that is multidisciplinary. So I can leave my office sitting, head 2 kilometers down the road to our pipe fabrication shop and have a conversation with a welder, and speak in terms that he and I are they we both understand, and that goes a long way. And at the same time, you know um, when I moved back to Newfoundland, technology was a big is and continues to be a big part of it, and understanding the basics allowed me, because my role evolved as time went on, to embrace technology and to bring some technology to the companies that I was working for. Understanding the basics allowed me to paint a picture that allowed people to buy in, because it's a little bit
Mhm.
intimidating when you take
Yeah.
those roles, right?
And when you're intimidated, you tend to say no or back away prematurely without actually understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a big difference, back here in Newfoundland, very much a unionized operation. The province is a unionized workforce, quite different in southern Alberta and the shops that I was working in. That perhaps was my biggest adjustment, is understanding how that dynamic went about, because I literally jumped off a plane and landed in Calgary and went to work, and it was all hands on deck, and
Hmm.
then you land back into this arrangement, and I didn't weld when I got back to Newfoundland. And by the end of it, I decided to move towards further my career, at least I thought I was, and take a different path. So we I stayed in Alberta until 2008. So I was there for almost 8 years, 7, 8 years, and got married in 2007. So like a lot of people that come home once a year, twice a year, and the marriage is a big deal. There's quite a soiree and lots of family around, and you tend to get a little bit homesick, right? So
Hmm.
I remember coming back and having a few beers with my dad and a couple of buddies, and I said, I think this is the last time, because we had done this every year back and forth, and it's, it's expensive. And it's also
Hmm.
tiring, you block out your 3 weeks and you had to make it worth your while. Because
Yeah, yeah.
landing in St. John's, the community I lived in, was 4 hours drive from the airport. So, that in itself,
That's a
if
day's
you do
gone right there. Yeah.
if you do that in Alberta, you get from one end to the other, damn near, right? So it was different, and so I moved back in 2008, a year after we got married. We packed it up and came back.
So what happened there? You're in Alberta. Sounds like you went through school. You got your journey person 2008, which is basically the same year you decided to come back.
No,
You know,
2005.
okay,
2005, I got
so
my journey.
2005 you got your journeyman. So you're working 3 years, not as a welder that whole time, or were you dedicated now after your journey person to weld, or
No,
were you
yeah,
still doing a back and forth?
back and forth first, but the last 3 years, I when I got once I got my journey person, I moved to Medicine Hat. So I actually moved to Medicine Hat, and when I moved to Medicine Hat, I said, that hour drive, it was not a not a real fun drive from Brooks to Medicine Hat for anybody that listens and familiar with it. There's literally two turns, one off the
Mhm.
highway and one on. So it was tiring as the day goes on. I have a lot of respect for anybody that do that day in, day out. So I decided to move back to Medicine Hat, and my wife was going to university there, or girlfriend at the time, and I joined another company, an above ground tank company, tank
Okay, yep.
storage, Platinum Energy Services, which were based out of Calgary, but they had set up a little place, a little operation in Redcliffe, Alberta, and I worked there until I moved home. And so once I got there, I was welding for the first 6 months, and that was by design. The gentleman that had hired me and had asked, because he saw my education and whatnot experience, he said, "Brad, I'd like for you to be my quality rep, get into the quality control, help us build that." And I told him no. I said I want to be a welder first, because he had been in business other years previous, and had a core group that he called upon to come back to get this going, because he knew it was going to work with the right guys and girls. And
Hmm.
I didn't. I was new, and I was the only Newfoundlander too. So I said
You
I
like to
want to
prove
weld
yourself.
first.
Yeah.
I wanted to weld first, and I wanted to get to know
Hmm.
them. And after
Yeah.
6 months, then I made the leap into the quality and those types of things. And he knew once went home and got married, he knew the leash was going to get shorter, because the pool, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
it happens to a lot of people, and when you have the opportunity to do so, you got to try to take it. You got to take a risk,
Yeah, you
and
do. Yeah.
you got to take a risk. So I left Platinum, and I moved back to Newfoundland for the company that I work for now, and that's the Cal Group.
All right. So this is a perfect time to take a break. So up until this point, we've been, figuring out your path, which, took you from all across the country, figuring out, along the way you get married, along the way you get a red seal, along the way you work for a couple really cool companies that you get a lot of information on. And now you're on a plane back home. So with that, we'll take a break, get a message in from our sponsors, and we'll be right back here at the CWB Association podcast. And we're back here on the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron. Thanks for tuning in. We got a really fun story, really good time going on here with Brad from Cahill. Kill, Cow.
Cahill, go for it. You might as
I
well.
don't want. I don't want to be a Westerner. I want to be an everybody in her,
It's a
right?
family
So
name. It's a family
yeah.
name. So
So I want to say it
it's Cal.
properly.
Cal.
Cal. All right. So from Cal out in the eastern coast. So when we left before the break, you were just getting on your plane, freshly married, ready to move back home. And did you have this job at Cal before you got on the plane, or did you come back to the East Coast to your stomping grounds without that safety net?
No, no, I had the job. So again, returning back home and going to work back at Platinum, and started looking because as much as the industry had done well in my first 7 years in Alberta, if you remember back
Oh,
2007,
yes.
2008, there was a little bit of vibrations going through
That's the year I
in
pulled my
Alberta.
stocks out.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of us. And I had built a house in 2005, 2006. I had Medicine Hat, and we had done some extra work, put a detached garage in the backyard and that kind of thing. And I could tell looking around the block the for sale signs that were popping up, and things were not feeling the same way. And
Mhm.
quite the opposite was happening at the time on the East Coast. As much as I lived in Alberta, I always paid attention to the news across the country, and oil and gas here was doing something different. And
Mhm.
I thought to myself, I said to my wife, "Is if we're going to start a family, and that was on the list to do, and we had to get to it, I think we should probably explore." So I went looking about opportunities that might be here, and I was quite surprised in 2008 because I didn't look for one job in 2001 when I left. There was nothing.
Mhm.
And 7 years later, the floodgates had opened in the quite
Lots
the
of
opposite.
opportunity. Yeah.
Lots of opportunity. And for somebody who had went to a place like Alberta, schooled, trained, and experienced, that was sought after. Obviously,
Mhm.
everybody knows what you're getting if you're working in a place like that and how
Mhm.
valuable that is. I applied for this group. They were growing. They were a project-based company, and they wanted to create a corporate position dedicated to welding and the technology, the procedure development, and the forward, I guess you'll say forward thinking, because there was starting to overlap not only oil and gas, but mining industry, different province and jurisdictions. They needed to get certified in all these places. So yeah, so I joined them as a corporate position as a welding specialist. So no more whip in the hand, and I right.
That's a little bit sad.
Yeah, it
A little
was.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, it was. No more whip in the hand, but I joined the corporate office then, and became a good idea because despite all the project growth, they had a core group of individuals then dedicated. No matter so, knowledge didn't get lost as you move from
Mhm.
project to project.
So, like, for the listeners that are out there that are welding, and there's a lot of really great welders out there that got that little bit of ambition in their mind about moving into the corporate world. I was one of them. It was a scary and daunting transition to get out of the shop and into the office. How did you feel about kind of getting out of the shop and into the office now into a more, this is now a corporate role. This is an office, life now. How did you feel about that transition?
I started it, I guess, in Alberta with platinum and taking on the quality role.
Hmm.
Um, no office per se. You were, very much embedded into the welding day to day. Um, that was a high production operation. There was, a small group of people that knew what they were doing. It was fast paced. There was a lot of moving parts, but you were still getting a little taste of it. Um, the difference is, I guess, is what do you want to do?
Hmm.
And so for me, I wanted to, I'm a individual that has to recognize I'm getting something done. I have to progress. You got to feel like you're moving forward. And it's not that I ever felt that I was moving backwards when I was welding, but I had some what I felt was some pretty cool ideas, and if all I did was share them with myself, it wasn't much good. So, so I decided to kind of just tip my toe a little bit and say, okay, how can we do this? Because the shops were very much manual, and as much as we still employ manual welding today, we recognize that there are other avenues and technologies that we can use to do things better. So I went for it, and now over the last 13 years, I've moved perhaps further away from the trade. In the last, say, 5 years, and it's only within the last 3 months when you and I started chatting that I've kind of came back full circle to
Yeah, sorry, I just
everything.
I put that rope on you and I just started pulling back on you there, Brad.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you brought this up a couple times, and I'd love to get your view on it. But as a welder now in an office, looking at fabrication, looking at the big picture of jobs and scope and time and cost, you've brought up technology a couple times, and that is something that I think many welders wrestle with. There's kind of the group that's group A, I'll say, that is like a welder. You don't, it doesn't matter. A welder's a welder. It doesn't matter what kind of welder, as long as it strikes an arc, you can work with it, make it work. Then there's like group B that is kind of on the fence, being like, oh, this cool stuff that's out there. I kind of want to know about it, know a little bit about it, but they're not really, if it's not at work, it's not a big deal. And if it is at work, to kind of play with it. And then there's like group C that's very forward with tech, that is like, they're asking their boss, can you bring in the new machines? I think we can shave time off of this. I think we can do this faster and better and cleaner. You know, as a manager now, how do you approach technology and those maybe different groups of welders that might be out there?
Definitely encountered all the above,
Mhm.
and I've transitioned through each of those groups even along the way, and it's about, I guess, you got to be well rounded.
Mhm.
There's different irons that you got to pull to be able to get the job done. So, but at the same time, um, if you look just outside of where you work, other companies, other countries, other jurisdictions, they are doing things differently. Here in Newfoundland, we're on an island, and so, transportation of things, there's an extra cost to bring things in and to ship things out. So, I think our approach, in and a lot of other shops, if you can minimize the labor that it takes to get there, and gone, very much time some of these technologies, some of these processes, GTAW, for example, a very high quality, but typically known as a low production type
Absolutely.
process.
Mhm.
And so in Newfoundland, in the oil and gas with Cal, we deal a lot, perhaps as much as 80% in exotics. And so, coming from Alberta and the shops that I was working in, it was 44W through and through.
Yeah,
Hold on
yeah.
tight. It was, that's what you
I
did.
know, yeah, yeah. A36 on a fancy day.
Keep going. And so, coming back to Newfoundland and getting, what got me going was the weld procedure development. So as much as I had the inspection and I had the welding, when I got back to Newfoundland is when I really started to wrap my head and team up with some engineers and some um, clients, and develop procedures to weld for these crazy cool offshore jobs that we were going to be building. As cool as it was in Alberta to build, the things that we were building there, and there's other places in Canada that do crazier things than what I got exposed to. There's no doubt about it. I'm not trying to discount it, but if you go from a 44W to a duplex stainless steel, there's something to be said about an 8-inch skid 140
Mhm.
duplex, or a titanium and 6MO and copper nickel. And all of a sudden, it was like, gee, this stuff is pretty cool. But a lot of it is traditionally welded with GTAW because of the need to have high quality,
Mhm.
right? And so, that's where we went looking, and for a technology that it could allow us to maintain the quality but increase the production, because what happens is other places in the world have cheaper options for labor, and if you can't compete, the owners are, they're obviously going to go elsewhere to get things done. So that's why I embraced the technology, and it's kind of grown and grown and grown, and I'm happy to say Cal as a company, and you need to be lucky sometimes too. You can't
Mhm.
only can't be driven. Cal is a company that afforded me and the team that I work with the financial resources to develop these things, to purchase these things, to dream about it and try it. We didn't have the research and development stage. These were proven technologies, but you had the union, you had the owners, you had the industry. It was different, and
Mhm.
on a couple of occasions, our team has been lucky of blazing a new trail and getting a new technology introduced to various industries that we work in here for sure.
And that's amazing, because I did a stint for a while working for a company here in Saskatchewan where we did specialty, all exotics for the mining industry. Because when you get up into the deep uranium and potash, the stuff is so corrosive that you're working with exotics all the time to try to find better solutions that won't be eaten instantly by heated and soaked potash and well, radioactive uranium, right? And it was the exact same process you're talking about. You'd bring something in, and the only process that exists for it is TIG, GTAW. So you're doing like a silicone head, silicone bronze, and you to a nickel base, and you got to find these weird fillers, and there's a preheats, like, there's this huge process to get this weld done. And okay, it looks awesome, and there's always the three C's of TIG, right? Clean, 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 right? Doesn't matter what it is, but it's clean, clean, clean material, clean tungsten, clean filler. And it's a very controlled but slow process. So we would do one, everyone's happy, and then you sit back and look and think, this will never make me a dollar. We're going to lose money on this if we do this way, because it took 11 hours to do one weld, and that's just not reasonable, you know.
No, I know, but at the same time, in certain industries, they're willing to pay the premium because
Mhm.
it's required in such a way. And again, we just tried to strike a balance,
Yeah.
and the tradespeople that we were working with, they saw it. It was tiring. You're down there 8, 10 hours a day. It's intense heat,
Hmm.
not quite as smoky as your welding carbon steel and these types of things, but equally, So we moved ourselves from manual to semi-automated, and before we got going on the call there, we kind of talked about another and we did the same thing with the carbon steel. We
Hmm.
brought in and we reached out to the semi-automated, and we went from GMAW, your standard route, and brought in surface tension transfer, flux core, submerged arc for the larger diameters. And all of a sudden, the people that we had working on the tools were like, "I'm not as tired at noon as I used to be."
Yeah, and you know STT is a Lincoln product, and good for Lincoln, but for argument's sake, it's a modified waveform is the
That's right.
generic term, because Miller, ESAB, everyone's got their toes in the
Absolutely,
game, right? And
absolutely.
and, and they're all great. All
And
these
we've
technologies.
used versions of them. We've used versions of
Absolutely.
them all.
And I
Absolutely.
love them because A, like you said, cleaner, easier. B, less smoke. It's a less toxic environment. And lastly, it's not hard to learn. These are processes where welders are kind of like intimidated by, until they get in there and pull the trigger, and then you see their eyes light up, being like, "This is cool." And you're running joints like in speeds you'd never believe, in positions you thought were impossible.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we became, like everything when you're welding, you need to produce. So you became a production facility,
Mhm.
in lack of a better term. And now the nice thing about these machines and all the, whether it be ESAB, the Millers and Lincoln, they're multi-based. So it's a one-stop shop. You pull the
Mhm.
trigger and you move from process A. You pull the trigger, you go to process B. It's not a big deal. They're mobile, suitcases and all the different things. So we were able to take what we did in the shop and transfer it to the field.
Awesome.
And so that was a big deal as well. So, you know, even though I didn't get to weld, I was exposed to welding a lot. And it's only when I wanted to do that and keep doing it for as long as I could. And then, when you work for a company and you contribute and they ask you to do something different, not every day do you get asked to do something different.
Mhm.
So when
Yeah,
you get
and
asked, you gotta kind of take the chance,
yeah, you
right?
gotta say yes, right?
Yeah, and especially if you're good at it, they rarely may ask you because they don't want to lose somebody who's good at doing something. So they kept asking me. So either I was no good at it or they wanted me to do something different. I'm not sure. But it moved from there. So yeah, that's it's a big part of it. The well procedure development as well. Then on the quality side, the certifications. I
Mhm.
mean, talk about another layer of a
Mhm.
tradesperson moving away from the trade, but building the company's catalog so that more tradespeople could be
Mhm.
employed by the trades. Sure, how could you not bother with that? So, Ontario, Saskatchewan,
Mhm.
Manitoba, British Columbia, Newfoundland, Labrador, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI. Well, we're damn near every place there is that could be and hold certifications in them in various industries. So had a part to play in all that, and that was a lot of fun too because you watched it grow, right? Yeah, you were
Yeah.
involved.
And that's something that it's a fear that people have, and I'll tell you right now, any company you're in, it's not a reality. Technology does not mean less welders. That's never been the
No,
reality anywhere I've ever been, and I've worked all over this dang planet. The tech allows you to do things faster and cleaner and safer. That never means less welders, it means more work. And the more money your company makes, that's more welders, more pay, more security. I've never seen it be in the other direction.
I'm happy to say, in almost all cases, and again, I said earlier about Alberta being, or where I was working in Alberta, I'll say a non-union type of arrangement, or at least where I
Mhm,
was working, and then moving back in Newfoundland, a lot of unionized shops, not all, were affiliated with the building trades here, and it's a big deal when they embrace. So to have that was a stepping stone, because what happened was one talked to two, talked to four, talked to 10, and then all of a sudden we were on a mission kind of a thing. And you're exactly right. Um, Time and money take care of most things, right? And
mhm.
we put the time into it to develop it, and if we needed more room because we needed to build more things, money, we just need to keep things moving. And it was nice to be able to do that. We needed to do it, and I'm happy that I was involved in it for sure.
So you got a really nice picture up behind you. I'm just gonna. That's a looks like a 316 stainless. I don't think that's a duplex though. I think that's just a clean stainless, and that looks like a solid wire MIG, like an 045 on a C2 gas. It's not too hot. There's not a lot of discoloration there. So am I even close or am I way off?
You're a little bit off.
Okay, tell me. I'd like to know because it's just a picture, and it's a podcast, and if you want to see the picture, you're gonna have to go to YouTube because these are up on YouTube. So.
Absolutely. No, no, what it is, it's actually a super duplex
Oh,
weld. So it's super
okay.
duplex. That was welded with a semi-automated GTAW.
Really? So this is wire fed now, GTAW.
Wire fed, so your MIG wire
Mhm.
feeding at the end of that tungsten. It's a process, a technology that we employ in our facilities here, and it looks really neat and cool. And
Mhm.
again, if people can see on the YouTube, but I want to put it up there because if you, it looks almost like a machine did it.
Well, that's what I was about to say. It looks very automated, right? Which is why I went immediately to a MIG because I've done a lot of automated MIG setups on pipe that run beautifully. They look just like that. The clean edges, you can tell this is low heat. It didn't get overheated. It looks very controlled.
Yeah, and it's one of the biggest reasons why we went there. Heat inputs and dealing with all these exotics was a big deal. Again,
Mhm.
you're moving fast. You're depositing increased weld metal into
And
the
clean.
joint.
Mhm.
Very clean, virtually no fume, and not a
Mhm.
lot of fume anyway with the GTAW. But the big thing about it was the ease of use. So we had folks that, as a GTAW welder, I like to say you're a one-person band. Your feet and arms and hands and heads and neck, everything is moving, and you need to be very
Yeah.
orchestrated. With this semi-automated TIG, everything is in the finger. It's all
Mhm.
in the one hand. So the foot pedal is gone. There's no more one, your left hand or right hand feeding the wire in, because that's being fed in there. So it made life a lot simpler. So what happened was the best welders in our shop continued to be the best, but the good welders and great welders in their shop just got a whole lot better,
Better.
because
Yeah.
their life, they were like, oh my gosh, some people drive automatic cars because they don't want to bother with the clutch, and this gives them the automation, and
Mhm.
so it is a nice little talking point to put up there, and to put in, but consistent. That's another thing. It's a very consistent process, so it takes a lot of the thinking out to produce a high quality weld.
And that's awesome. And I love seeing that stuff in industry. It's always the cool stuff. I just was on a meeting with an apprenticeship board, and they were talking about tickets with me, and they were like, from the point of view of the CWB Association, we always encourage students to get tickets, and they're talking about their 7018 or 4918 in Canada, and there's usually a solid wire MIG or maybe a flux core. And I said, yeah, absolutely, those are all very important in the industry, but I would say those are like the starter tickets. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, there's like the next tier, right? And you shouldn't ever discount that because it's not all just about getting welders in, but it's also about keeping welders and moving welders up, right?
Absolutely.
And I said, you got to look at the next tier, which is like the nickels, the stainlesses, and then you get into the aluminums, and there's a whole second tier of tickets that are very valuable. Like, let me tell you, I because of the shop I got into when I was 20, I got all my stainless tickets. And thank God this is before duplexes. It's a lot more complicated now, but I had my stick, MIG, and flux cores in all positions for all of them in stainless. That was my career for like the next 10 years. Having those tickets kept me employed constantly, you know, and it wasn't that I'm smarter or better. I just had that next level of certification, you know,
Absolutely.
and that's and it's good to see companies like yours and even your attitude towards this reflect that, you know.
Yeah, no, it's a big deal. Specialty. So,
Mhm.
having that specialty is a big deal. And as an individual, it's equally, in some places, employers pay a premium for tickets for individuals that challenge
Absolutely.
themselves and have that next level up. We were lucky, or we are lucky, in the fact that it's a it's a two-third, one-third split, exotics versus carbon, or low alloys in our
Mhm.
shop. There's a lot of exotics coming through. So, not only you're getting into the titaniums and all these different types of materials, um, it's cleaner. So,
It is. Although
uh,
some of the fumes are a little dangerous, so make sure you wear your respirators, people.
You
Some of them. Yeah.
always make
Mhm.
sure. I mean, PPE is a big thing, absolutely, and that's something else that has evolved over time. From my early days in southern Alberta and what we do now. Can't believe I'm saying this is almost 20 years later, but um, the safety is a big
Absolutely.
thing,
No.
and the exposure or the awareness of it is a big deal. So, and you're right. The fumes and everything is very, very important. But the biggest part about it is, folks were not as tired at the end of the day. These processes are easier on their bodies
Mhm.
to be able to do the work.
So now, at this stage in your career, as we near the end of the podcast here, where do you see yourself going in your career, either in the world of Brad or with Kel, or or do you see yourself venturing out, or is there another adventure you got in the mind on the side of your desk, maybe?
Yeah, well, I've been lucky enough that I've worked for only three companies, and three phenomenal companies in my career.
Mhm.
Um, but Cal has grown, and I've grown with them, kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
So, my most recent position with them is business development, of all things. So, it's helping the different divisions of the company
Mhm.
reach another level, have build relationships with potential clients. Networking is a big deal, and it's kind of a homecoming, because I'm back into the fabrication side of the business a little bit more than what I was before. And that's another, all things happen for a reason. It's just so happened that right around the same time that I got this position, you reached out to me, because I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Canadian Welding Association and all this.
Mhm. Mhm.
And for there's some people that may be listening that actually attended the conference that we hosted down here in St. John's, Newfoundland. I forget the year, to be quite honest with
I
you.
think it was 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we had a great time doing that, and the people that we were associated with, and then they came down. We entertained, we learned a lot, and I'm hoping that this business development role allows me the time to get back into that a little bit more. When I moved into different positions and having a young family, you don't have the time. As much
Mhm.
as you believe in it and you want to foster it, you don't have the time. Now this position might allow me to get back in, because welding's going nowhere, fabrication's going nowhere, and we only need to get better, right?
Mhm.
So, it's important to be able to stay connected to folks, because we're a company and we that's across the country. The Canadian Welding Bureau and Association can help me tiptoe right through the country
Absolutely. Yeah.
and find ways, partners that we might be
Hmm.
able to team up with to do some work. So business development is where it is right now, and I suspect I'll be at Cal for a while yet. You know, there's a bit of a saying, right? Do you bleed Cal blue? And
Yeah.
there's no doubt I'm one of those.
And I'm glad you brought up the association because I was going through my email lists, and the Newfoundland Association is disbanded officially. They got it kind of just rolled, and I'm not saying that there's not members and people like all the same people with the same passions are still there, but it was just a time thing, and industry and work, and they kind of got pulled into what is the Nova Scotia chapter and Halifax chapter, which are strong and going well with Tony Rose and John Fisher, and I would love to see either better cooperation with the existing chapters or big picture expand back in, get that chapter up and running again. I think that would be fantastic, and we need partners and people like you, man. Like you're doing awesome.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that we can. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves or whatever there, but I'm hoping that there's something that we could do because you are right. There's a lot of people that's passionate about it. Welding is a big part of our industries that we're dealing with here. Oil and gas, the mining industry is a big. Aquaculture is a growing industry in Newfoundland, Labrador that is in Eastern Canada that hold on tight for what's even to come there. So I hope that there is because you are right. There's a lot of people that are passionate about it. There's a lot of people that have been involved in various industries. You just need to make sure you got that core. So I think what
Hmm.
happened was there was a bunch of young people like me that got into there 5 or 6 years ago, and we were all go. And then life happened, right? You're like, oh, hold on a minute. You got to slow back.
Babies.
Yeah, and I don't. I'm not going to say that.
Careers. Yeah.
Yes, I'm not going to say that it happens in every case, but
Hmm.
most of the people that I saw had a person who was in a different stage of their life that allowed them the time,
Hmm.
and still had the energy to be going into that. So I hope there is an opportunity to do it because I had a ball when I was involved. I did. I had a ball, and hopefully it keeps going.
Well, and every area, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, across Canada, for all the people listening, and now as we look to expand into the US, every area that has a chapter, that brings a chapter in, or supports the chapter, has a personality, and that personality is like that culture of Canada, and that's a beautiful thing. The Calgary chapter, the Saskatchewan chapters, out east in Ontario, every group brings their own flavor. And that flavor is represented from the industry that they serve, the type of work they do, the training programs they have, and when we network, it's amazing seeing that happen. Like you've been at these conferences when we're all together, the conversations, the laughs, the exchange of information that is done is just makes you feel awesome about our industry.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the first ones I attended was in Vancouver, and other than the fact that it was a long flight, that was pretty cool. I spent all those years in Alberta, never ever went to Vancouver, and
Hmm.
found myself all the way back. But unbelievable, and had colleagues that went from Newfoundland that went out there, and it opened your eyes, right?
Hmm.
I kind of liked it because with the welding engineering technician in me, some of the seminars and the different talks that was happening, it was a little bit more techy and a little bit more, detailed. And so you
Hmm.
could see that's pretty cool. I'll take 20 minutes and sit down there. Unbelievable organization of it. And,
Hmm.
like I said, it's important. Every industry needs something like that, right? They do.
Yeah,
Every
yeah, they
every
do. They
profession
do.
they need something like that, and those that have it does well. So it's good to see that it's still going. Good to see that it's still growing, and hopefully we can find a way in the not too distant future to bring it back.
Awesome, buddy. Well, this has been fantastic, and I feel like I can chat with you for hours. And next time I'm out east, I'm gonna have to stop by because I love the East Coast, man. I really enjoy it. Me and my wife have even thought, here and there, like, oh, there's some good jobs that pop up. That'd be a nice place to live, and it's really a beautiful area. And you're blessed to have a great career out there.
Yeah, no, it is, and stepping stones throughout, from out west back. It's been, it wasn't always easy, but it was a lot of fun all the way along.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie about that, and it's good. It's good to be able to be back home and where you raise your kids. I've got 3 kids, got a young family. Still be involved with the trade, still be involved with the industry, and listen, not everybody's doctors or lawyers or engineers, and if you can find a way, if you bite the bug, and I bit the big bug, I haven't moved away from it even now all these years. If you bite the bug, sky's the limit kind of thing with the welding,
Hmm.
what you can get involved in, and the directions you can take, and there's nothing wrong with burning rod all day. Absolutely. There's different paths. And I'm working for a company now that touches a lot of different areas. So that makes it fun too. So don't just,
Hmm.
I didn't anyway. Keep moving. That's the way I always look at it. Keep moving.
Yeah, no one needs to limit you. You decide where you want to go, and you just go there, right? So, as we head out on the show now, what would be the piece of advice you give a young person? Maybe let's target this to the East Coast. You're a young student coming out of high school in the East Coast. Look at industry around you, and it has been volatile in the past in the East, and it seems to be a little bit leveled off right now. There's big projects that I know of that are out there. What would be a piece of advice for them looking to get into the trades out east?
Well, yeah, East and a lot of our industries are in a bit of a turmoil here with the COVIDs and all the different things that are happening right now. For me, move. And
Mhm.
is there somebody in East? It's age old. Move west, but it's for anybody. Don't stay in one place. So go get the experience that you need in order to move as quickly as you can, because years go by very, very fast. And
Yeah.
so my first suggestion would be, get the education, but then go find the work. If you wait for the work to come for you, you may never ever find it. And sometimes you land the job, and some of the might not be the best job, but it was a job. And
Yeah.
there's things you'll take away from that. So my biggest suggestion for anybody into it is, don't wait for it. Go find it, and have a lot of fun living elsewhere. See the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate the time you took out for me in the podcast today, Brad. I really enjoyed having you on the show.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. And for all the listeners that have been tuning in, thanks again for staying with us on another episode. Again, follow us on all our social media and through Stitcher and iTunes and all the download formats. The podcast, is always looking to you as the listeners to support us. And also, if you know anybody out there with a great story that you wanna promote or share, or any cool companies across Canada or the world, send them my way. I will follow up with every lead you guys send me. I do follow up with every lead that you guys sent me, and I try to get everybody on the show because this is about the community and your stories. So let's keep this ball rolling. Thanks a lot, and thank you, Brad.
You're welcome.
We hope you enjoyed the show.
You've been listening to the CWB Association Welding Podcast with Max Ceron. If you enjoyed what you heard today, rate our podcast and visit us at cwbassociation.org to learn more. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions or suggestions on what you'd like to learn about in the future. Produced by the CWB Group and presented by Max Ceron. This podcast serves to educate and connect the welding community. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.